Welcome to the Enterprise Thought Leadership Podcast, where we explore the latest in enterprise trends, tech, and strategy with the top leaders shaping the future.
Hi, welcome to a podcast on stage with Enterprise Thought Leaders. My name is Kanika and I'm the managing editor of IT Security Wire, which is our enterprise and cybersecurity focused publication. We have engaged in conversations with thought leaders and industry experts, which reach over 1.3 million business leaders worldwide. Cloud adoption continues to grow at an extraordinary pace, but with it comes a widening security gap. Unlike traditional on-premise systems, cloud assets are ephemeral. They are spinning up and down in minutes, meaning that the critical data security teams need to investigate these threats often, and they can often disappear before the teams can actually act. Darktrace has announced a new capability that is designed to directly address this challenge and reshape how security teams investigate threats across hybrid and multi-cloud environments. Today we speak with Max Heinemeyer. He's a global field CISO of Darktrace to understand cyber risks through the cloud and what CISOs can do about it. Welcome to the show, Max.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
A little bit about him before we start with the questions. He's a cybersecurity expert with over a decade of experience in the field, specializing in a wide range of areas such as penetration testing, red teaming, SIEM and SOC consulting, and hunting advanced persistent threat groups. He works with the R&D team at Darktrace, shaping research into new innovations and their various defensive and offensive applications. Max's insights are regularly featured in international media outlets such as the BBC, Forbes, and The Wire. Max holds an MSc from the University of Duisburg-Essen. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Very well, yeah.
And a BSc from the Cooperative State University of Stuttgart in International Business Information Systems. It's lovely to have you here, Max. I'm looking forward to a very interesting discussion. We've not really discussed the cloud and the security issues in the cloud, very often. So this is going to be, something interesting for us as well. So the first question: the cloud is cracking, vulnerabilities exist. What's the basic protection that CISOs should have to be able to handle this new situation or circumstances?
Great question. I'm so excited to be here, let me tell you. So there's so much to say about the cloud. I've got conversations about this every single day. Basically, before I go into the question, I want to let your audience know that I talk to CISOs, SOC leaders, SOC analysts, enterprise architects, security architects, DevOps people, cloud people every single day. And I've got a team around me that does the same to understand the challenges and see where the struggles are and what solutions there could be. That's qualitatively, but we've also done various bits of research like honeypot cloud research and did surveys on what the challenges are in the cloud. So I'm going to draw from all of this in the discussion with you to let our audience know, not just my opinion, but basically founded in some of the data and research we did. So what are the crackling vulnerabilities and what can people do to have a base protection? I want to first say that I don't think we should talk about CVEs in particular only. So when you say vulnerabilities, a lot of our listeners might be thinking, oh, they talk about vulnerabilities in the CVE sense, like vulnerability scanning. But I want to go a bit broader because I think in today's day and age, that's a bit too narrow. And I would like to think about three areas here that pose challenges and vulnerabilities for cloud environments and CISOs. These three areas are on the technical side, on the technology side, on the process side, and on the people side. So what's the base minimum that CISO security teams should be doing to guard themselves and deal with these, crackling vulnerabilities, as you call it? I think on the technology side, it's certainly thinking holistically about the cloud. So not just trying to do antivirus like we did in the 90s or firewall segmentation like we did later and also earlier, just vulnerability scanning or just threat detection. They need to think about it like they think about any enterprise security. So on the tech side, and I'm sure we're going to discover this more as we go along in our discussion, it's about holistic perspective within the cloud, but also seeing your cloud as part of your bigger security stack. Don't treat it in isolation. And we can go into details in what kind of technology and what acronyms, but I think from a broad message perspective for our audience, it's important to think about the technology and don't treat it in isolation. Then from the process perspective, I would say it's important to think about your cloud transition. I talk to security leaders every single day. It's a huge privilege. And let me tell you and everybody, I haven't met a single organization that has finished their cloud transition or is done with the cloud. They always in a different state of going multi-cloud or going hybrid cloud or thinking about that cloud journey or going identity first or moving data centers. So I think from a process perspective, my recommendation is think about security as you go along. You're never going to be fully finished with your network and cloud and workload transitions, but don't have it as an afterthought. Don't think about your 2-year journey into the cloud and only on day 400 you start thinking about your security and how you can deal with it in the cloud, how you can shift your security needs. So think about it from the early stages on. And then the people side for me is almost the most interesting, I think, because boy, I used to be a security analyst years and years ago. I looked at threats myself through SIEM systems, through Darktrace systems, through other systems. And I think most of our audience understands what a traditional network intrusion looks like. Lateral movement, initial intrusion, malware is involved, identity theft. And finding a good analyst to deal with that can be difficult, a good SOC analyst. Now, what does a proper intrusion look like in a cloud system that's completely serverless and maybe just has Lambda functions and is multi-cloud? I think it's very difficult to deal with that, to have the body of knowledge and to investigate a cloud threat. So on the people side, what I'm saying is, my recommendation is build bridges early between DevOps and security, skill up your people, because it's harder than finding a unicorn, finding somebody who understands DevSecOps and is a security analyst at the same time. So just from a broad perspective about your question, what do people do on a base level to deal with vulnerabilities? Think about people, processes, and technology, and think about the few pointers I've just given out.
Right. So very often predictive tools score over detection tools. Do you agree with this? Do you not agree with this? And in either case, why?
What a good one. I think it depends. I think in the cloud, we've seen an iteration on security. Again, taking a step back, I don't think we have quote unquote solved cloud security. I don't think we yet know what a best blueprint looks like for cloud security. I think there's a lot happening on the technology front and the best practice piece. But what we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years in cloud is that the biggest and most hyped up thing was posture management. So predictive tools. What is the problem? What are the vulnerabilities? What attack paths exist? So I would say there's been a big focus in our industry on that because it was the most graspable, the most tangible technology out there for posture management. And there's a few vendors who've done a really good job in that space. Now, I would never say blankly to any company, you should start with predictive technology or you should start with detective technology. It really depends on their situation, on their people, on their processes, on their goals. Are they compliance focused? Are they threat focused? Are there specific requirements? What sector are they in? What are their business goals? What are their IT goals? There are so many factors to take into account. I would say in general, though, it's not one or the other. It should be in conjunction. So you do not just want to use predictive tools and let's say preventative tools, but you also don't want to just use detection and response tools. You want to have a healthy mix. But the priority of what's more important to your business is determined by your business goals and IT goals, and then deriving the security goals, obviously. So I would caution everybody who thinks, okay, I'm going to do cloud security. So I start with predictive and preventive because that's been the biggest thing in the last 5 years in cloud. I think we've seen a trend now away from just predictive and preventive, more towards detection and response, especially real-time detection and response. People start to notice that they can never prevent and predict every single attack, or they don't have the resources to fix every single security hole. So they need something that tells them when the security fails, when the prevention fails, and detection becomes important. It's almost bizarre to me, and I'm sure to a lot of people in your audience, that we have that same discussion we used to have for on-premise. Like I remember years and years ago, people were like, so should I do vulnerability scanning first, or maybe SIM detections first? Or is one better than the other? And the answer is, of course, you need everything. Maybe not SIM in specific, but of course some robust detection response system. So I guess my concluding answer on that question is preventative better or predictive better than detection and response? Well, it obviously depends, but don't follow the hype trends. Think about your security in the cloud as you do with the rest of your security stack.
So the short answer is whatever is working at that moment in time.
Yeah, I love how you can be so succinct. I like your controversial approach, but I don't think so. What I'm trying to say is there's a big focus in thought leaders in our industry on predictive tools, prevent. I think history has shown for everything else in security that that is just not enough and not always the best choice. So it's not just do whatever is best for the moment. I think be cautious of the current hype trends is what I'm trying to say.
That is true too. So the flexible scalability of the cloud is a source of its security vulnerability. Do you think that's true? And if yes, then what can be done about it? And what is actually being done? What are you seeing around you when you are meeting with security experts and organizations?
Yeah, is the flexible nature of the cloud the big problem? I wouldn't say the flexible nature itself, but what comes out of that. So what I'm seeing when I talk to CISOs, security teams, and what our research shows is that there's usually it's again, people, process, technology. On the people side, it's a disconnect between the security team and the DevOps team. Of course, we all love to speak about DevSecOps and how that's the same people and shifting left and finding vulnerabilities early. But just between us and everybody listening, that might be true for huge companies with a lot of money and very well-defined teams. For most small and medium businesses and even bigger medium businesses, it's just not feasible to have these dedicated roles. It's often a sysadmin that's doing everything, or the security engineer that has to do everything and knows a bit of cloud, or a cloud person who knows a tiny bit of security, but not the expert that knows all of the three areas, DevSecOps. So I think one of the big problems is deriving from the flexibility that the dev people, the security, the developers and the developer engineers often use that flexibility to quickly iterate, create environments, create services, create microservices that might be out of scope of the security team's purview and visibility. So because of that flexibility, there's things growing and things developing that the security team is trying to catch up on, but it's very difficult to do. They often don't have visibility. It's different reporting lines. They don't control the infrastructure. They don't see the cost. They don't see the architectures, let alone do they have logging or their own security tooling installed in any of these things. So the visibility is a big challenge, which comes from the flexibility, I think. Now, this goes further if we think about technology problems. When some of these systems are created and maybe not fully covered, they can be very ephemeral. You know this. A Kubernetes container might live 30 seconds. Elastic cluster might only live 2 or 3 minutes. Now, assume you've got a security alert in there. Now your security team sees that alert, but doesn't have enough information to investigate it fully because, it's a cloud alert, it just covers the basics. So they want to get to the actual system and maybe do a forensic deep dive, but lo and behold, that system is gone because it's ephemeral. So the raw data isn't there anymore. So what do? That's a massive problem we've seen, especially in highly regulated industries like finance, healthcare, and a few others, legal, public sector, where the security team wants to investigate something, but the raw data is gone, or they can't access the production systems because there are so many hoops and barriers to get to it in the cloud that it's just impossible. So there are smart solutions now in the marketplace where every time an alert is created, the forensic captures are taken and given to the security team. So technology is catching up with the requirements and challenges in this world. But coming back to your question, do I think the flexible scalability is the problem? I think what comes out of it and the speed of how we secure it is a challenge for sure. And we need to see how we can deal with that. I also hear from a lot of people that, and some of our research shows that, as soon as something comes online in a cloud environment, it becomes a target. So I'm sure we've all seen the pew maps and, threat intelligence of how quick things are being attacked when they come online. We've heard many stories about IoT and OT, like outdated systems and video cameras and these things. Research over 12 months where we put specific cloud honeypots out there that run developer tools and are multi-cloud and look like real systems shows that as soon as something comes online and there's a tiny chink in the armor, maybe an outdated version or a weak password, even in things like Selenium Grid or Jupyter notebooks or other things, it's taken very little time for threat actors to start exploiting these and getting in and then doing things in these environments. So I don't want to go too deep. I might come back to this later on the honeypot research. I think it's extremely interesting to see what's actually happening out there, how cloud systems are actually being attacked. But you can say for sure that the results of the flexible nature of cloud systems leads to some of the challenges we're seeing. It's not the core problem, I think not the only problem, but what comes out of it for technology, people and processes causes challenges.
And then even within the cloud, the hybrid, the multi-cloud environments, private or public clouds, or whatever, the number of classifications we have would also certainly pose distinctive threats. How do CISOs meet those threats? How do they mitigate them? Try to stay as safe as possible? Because the cloud
Yeah.
is an imperative. They cannot stop. Now organizations cannot function without, being on the cloud. So how do they do that?
Yeah, they sometimes they do better, sometimes they struggle, to be honest. So to your point about these multi-cloud environments and these hybrid environments, that is the big challenge. The complexity really is the challenge. You might have to have an Azure cloud expert and an AWS expert and a VMware expert and your on-premise network people. And then good luck trying to secure that all, to do unified logging, unified threat detection, to respond to time, investigate these things. So I don't want to say technology is the savior of us all. I'm a technologist by heart, and we got to be careful about technology, but there are good new technologies that people can lean on. I don't want to say AI, but I do think there's a lot of good automation out there and some good machine learning that helps automate the plumbing. So you are right, the multi-cloud and hybrid complexity factors make it extremely difficult to keep visibility, know where your environment is, know how to unify these things. But there are good solutions coming out that automate the plumbing in the background. So you as a security person or CISO don't need to understand the specifics of AWS or Azure or GCP or Oracle Cloud or any other cloud system. It can be abstracted and made very easy to access the data, to triage the data, to unify alerts. I would go even further and say often the cloud is treated as a very separate entity in security because it's so new and different and novel. But there is technology coming to the market where it makes it easier to unify your cloud security, even multi-cloud environments, with the rest of your security stack. So that's where I've seen environments where there's very traditional legacy ICS, industrial control system, OT operation technology, but they also have extremely modern cloud systems and on-premise and everything in between. And what really helps these security teams is having a unified view of these different domains coming together, being correlated together, and maybe already properly investigated. So you do not need to have an ICS expert at hand. You do not need to have a cloud expert at hand. But at the end, the security system is telling you, listen, somebody used an exposed cloud workload and did a weird connection to an on-premise server and then used an unused orphan admin account to pivot into your DMZ and go into your operation technology environment. I'm sorry for the tech jargon, but what I'm trying to say is technology can make it much easier to abstract and understand this. So you do not need 20 security ninjas, but maybe 3 IT security generalists to find threat actors and expose them early on. And this becomes particularly relevant where we've got a talent shortage. This is a big topic in itself, I know. I think it's actually a two-sided medal here. A, we don't have enough skilled professionals, but B, as somebody who works for a vendor, it's on us as vendors and software providers to make it easier to use these tools, right? If you need 15 years of experience to understand a security tool and use it properly and become a ninja, of course we don't have enough people. And every security team I talk to, every CISO I talk to doesn't realize they're competing with each other. Be it a public school, be it a bank, be it an insurance company, be it a food production company, a grocery shop, a retailer. Everybody's telling me, Max, I'm trying to hire more and better people, security analysts. And of course, that's never going to be feasible, right? So there's a big challenge there. And I think it's important to realize that we need to do something about that on the vendor side, but also on the talent side. We won't get out of this by ourselves.
Yeah, and I think I missed that point in the discussion. So I just wanted to ask you something which just occurred to me, and it's fine if you don't think it's relevant to this discussion. Sorry. So as a technology journalist, about 15 years ago is when we started writing about the cloud as a new emerging solution for every issue that any organization may have. And then at that point in time, there was virtualization, and then there were the first stage of adopting the cloud was virtualizing your networks, your data, your whatever it was at that point. So do you think organizations that have adopted the cloud at the very beginning, maybe the first responders, first adopters, initial adopters, would have inherited some vulnerabilities because of those steps which were done for the adoption of the cloud? I mean, they could have, of course, resolved them later on. But do you think that has left any traces of vulnerability in their organization's security setup?
What an amazing question, right? I just think about this. So when I think back 10 years, 15 years, these companies that started virtualizing their servers, right? They use big VMware clusters or other things that were out there at the time. They lifted and shifted more or less their physical hardware onto VMware or other virtualization clusters. I think that's one end of the spectrum. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, if I think about startups today, they might be completely cloud native. Some of them don't even have their own, hardware because they rent it and they just use cloud services and M365. So there's these two sides, and your question is one better off than the other? Do they have similar vulnerabilities? Do the ones that started early, did they do it right and are secure now? Or maybe they carried through some of these vulnerabilities? That's how I interpret the question.
Yeah. So it's not exactly are they doing better or they doing better. See, it is like digital nativity. The younger generation is digital native, but we have also learned along the way. So who is smarter? We're both able to handle it. So at this point of time today, both the extreme ends of the spectrum are able to handle their cloud vulnerabilities. But the people who got onto the cloud earlier with their legacy technology, their legacy infrastructure, had to virtualize, and that was not completely patched. So what I wanted to know is the earlier generation of adopters, did they carry any vulnerabilities into their systems which probably could be overlooked over a period of time or did not have the solutions at that point? And then, we went on to the next generation and people forgot about it.
Yeah,
Would it still be making them vulnerable?
I see. I think if you think about CVEs, like actual vulnerabilities, technical vulnerabilities alone, you could make that argument that people who had their old systems just shifted into the cloud and didn't patch them properly are still exposed or more exposed. But honestly, in my experience, it's more an iterative process where people do that lift and shift, and then 3 or 5 years later, there's a network refresh or they change virtualization providers. Because of that, they change their operating system sometimes, they expose different services, there's a firewall refresh. So I would think it's highly unlikely that some of these very legacy problems got pulled through to today and are still causing the same problems. I think there's different challenges though. That's what I was trying to get at. I think those people who lifted and shifted and have a very traditional mindset are facing different challenges than these digital natives today in terms of technology and infrastructure, because they might have legacy systems or old school systems, but they also know how to secure them. There's probably more controls around, it's better documented. On the other hand, you've got the digital natives that are running at 100 miles an hour and they haven't documented everything. They might be on a better patch level, but they're exposing their credentials in a different way. They have misconfigurations in place. They might not follow other best practices. So it's extremely hard to say. But to your core question, I don't think that like somebody from 10, 15 years ago that pulled through the infrastructure into the cloud now is better or worse off than somebody who's starting today, basically.
So that was just a doubt in my head. And you're so right. The cloud native organizations have their own set of vulnerabilities, which could be even worse. So we can't really judge there.
Exactly.
So the cloud has brought, like we just discussed, untold advantages for enterprise. If security is an issue, there is entire success story of the company, and this could be a cloud native organization. It rests on shifting sands. It is not very stable in terms of because there are still so many holes in the cloud, if we can say it that way. So what would you propose or what would you advise any CISO to do to maintain its integrity for enterprise? Because for a company it is not just technology, it's also the brand management, the entire infrastructure that is required to run the business. It's not just the IT part of it or the networks part of it. What would be the smart way for them to make sure that that vulnerability doesn't impact their brand or the business objectives in the long run?
Yeah. This is probably the most important question for our audience, I think. And I would even say it's not just cloud specific, right? For most, even if somebody runs on premise and their brand is damaged because of a security vulnerability or an incident or their customer data is stolen or they have downtime, it's hugely impactful. So I would say being virtually safe, digitally safe is a requirement to do business in today's world for most industries and most businesses. It's absolutely crucial. So I'm going to come to your cloud question specific, but I think the question is actually quite generic for any organization using IT for their business processes. And I would say, again, maybe I'm overemphasizing this, but people, processes, and technology. And I would say the most important thing in my 15 years where I've worked with CISOs and with security teams and been hands-on, the biggest difference is if the CISO, whatever the title is, the security decision maker, has the ear of the board or the owners of the business. So if we think about the board setup where you got the CEO and the CFO and CIO, you need to have the CISO or an equivalent voice at that table. I've seen situations where the CISO or equivalent reports into the CFO or CIO, and they're just puppets. That I mean, overly exaggerating here, right? Not puppets in the personal sense, just they don't have autonomy to make decisions. They always have to beg for budget. They can't articulate the dangers, and especially in more traditional industries like manufacturing or retail or food processing or operation technology, the owners of a business or the higher level board don't, have that notion for the risk that might be there because they're used to doing things manual. They reproduce things, and that's what they need to do. They want to run a business. That's amazing. But that's why there needs to be the voice of the CISO and that autonomy at the table to ring the alarm bells to say, no, we need more budget. There's new threats out there. Somebody's targeting us. We have these incidents. So I would say that's the first and foremost important thing. If you don't have that set up in some way, if you're, just reporting 3 levels up and you can't determine your own budget to a certain extent, it's going to be an uphill battle from the start. So I think on the process side, organizational setup is extremely important. Then on the people side, I would say you can do a lot with a little. Most companies, like, 80% of small and medium businesses won't have dedicated security people. So what can they do? There's a lot of really good practices, advice, and free tooling from most governments out there. In the UK, the NCC, for example, or NCSC, and in Germany, it's the BSI and others that really offer very practical advice and hardening guidelines. And it's not about being 100% secure, just good enough for now that you don't get targeted by automatic campaigns and things like that. So on the people side, do the trainings, hire your own people, give them the education they need. You don't need to hire 20 security ninjas. Rely on the public goods and services and support that you can get from your government, locally or federal. And on the technology side, I'm biased. I work for an AI security company, but I would urge people to look at modern day solutions. And I'm not speaking about the hype cycle of LLMs solving everything, quote unquote. I'm speaking about these solutions that have been battle tested, that bring a lot of automation to the table, that are augmenting the humans. Because keep in mind, you will never be able to hire enough people in security. And why would you, right? It's not your business model. You want to produce things. You want to solve cancer. You want to bring people to the moon and Mars and do many other amazing things. So you shouldn't try to bloat up your security team. So I guess on the tech side, what I'm saying is explore the cutting edge of technology, see what automation is out there, and embrace the industry. It's not always easy. Marketing can be extremely difficult in the cyber industry. Everything sounds the same. Every vendor is speaking about the same acronyms and saying they do everything and everything is AI. But I would suggest to people to test some of the interesting things on their own data, to cut through the marketing and get to the real value. Don't be dazzled by sales pitches. Talk to your peers. That's one more thing, if I may throw it in. The best CISOs I know in my own experience, or how I would judge them, are those that have a strong network, that have 3 or 4 WhatsApp groups or Signal groups and email chains, and they meet other CISOs once a month. And that could be from competitors, right, in the same industry where they normally compete in the market, but they face the same challenges and threats. And these people are really up to speed, are clued up. They can exchange ideas. What did you think about that vendor? We got attacked by this group. Did you also get this spam bombing? So I think coming back to people, your network can be your best friend. And that's where conferences come to play, or informal groups. But I leave it there. I think these are 3 big takeaways, hopefully, for audience to go away and have to think about.
So yes, if this was not a technology focused interview, I would have taken your first points the most. If the CISO has a seat on the board, he can almost, or she can almost, get anything done. And if the business understands the risk it runs because of security vulnerabilities and not treated as an afterthought or an extra expense, then a lot of things can be solved, right?
And the next best thing is having good reporting. This might sound very boring, but even if you don't have a direct seat at the table, the way you report into the board or your stakeholders can be extremely meaningful. It's very challenging, but think about, is it maybe based and tied to financial data, how much revenue you have saved, how much downtime you have saved? Is it comparative reporting? How do you fare against your peers, benchmark? Or is it overall quantitative reporting? We stopped X threats, which is 10% more than last week, or we detected 15 vulnerabilities or things like that. There's no right and wrong. Usually it's a blend, but it highly depends on your audience and the board and your stakeholders. But that can have a big impact as well with reporting.
Right. So thank you so much, Max. I really enjoyed this discussion, and I'm sorry for the extracurricular questions. It just occurred to me, and you know, I just thought I'd just put it out there. Also, because the kind of technology that we've been taught to write about seems to have suddenly become very old-fashioned, and there is so much new stuff happening that the good old virtualization days seem to be like, oh, that was a couple of decades ago. So I thought I'd just ask you because you'll probably be aware of it. So
Yeah.
again, thanks for your time. We have a very healthy discussion, and thank you so much for this.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us for the Enterprise Thought Leadership Podcast. Please do follow us on social media and subscribe for more ideas and insights. Until next time.